For 2 months, I slept in the freezing mud. The rival clan burned my home to ash. I survived on scraps. I trusted no one. I thought crossing the Eastern River meant finding a safe place to close my eyes. Instead, I stumbled right into the hunting grounds of 2 alpha twins. Cole stood quiet, watching my every move like a chess match. Maddox stepped up, puffed his chest, and pushed Alpha Command into his voice, expecting me to drop to my knees and bare my neck. I did not cower. I pulled a notched hunting knife from my boot and told him his voice cracked. Most alphas would rip my throat out for the disrespect. Maddox just stopped, slapped his own chest, and yelled at his inner wolf to stop wagging its tail. I just wanted a quiet night of sleep. Instead, I got a pack war, a lethal Damascus steel blade, and 2 dangerous alphas claiming me as their Luna. Chapter 1. Mud sucked at Blair's boots. She dragged her tired legs across the shallow river, the freezing water biting her ankles. 2 months on the run. 2 months of dodging the rival pack that burned her home to ash. She reached the far bank and collapsed against the trunk of a dead oak tree. Her chest heaved. Just give me 1 night without a fight. She reached into her coat pocket and pulled out her notched hunting knife. The metal showed wear, but it still held an edge. She wiped the blade on her jeans and slid it down into her left boot. She needed to close her eyes. She leaned her head back against the rough bark. A twig snapped in the brush. Blair did not jump. She kept her breathing steady. She opened her eyes and dropped her hand toward her left boot, resting her fingers near the hidden hilt. 2 men stepped out of the tree line. They blocked the moonlight, casting long shadows over the riverbank. The one on the left wore a worn leather jacket. The scent of damp cedar and rain drifted off him. He flashed a row of sharp, white teeth. The one on the right wore a dark button-down shirt. His expression revealed nothing. He tracked her hand, watching her fingers hover over the leather of her boot. "You crossed the wrong border, stray," the man in the leather jacket said. "I don't care about borders," Blair said. She stayed on the ground. She refused to cower. "I care about sleep. Move along." The man in the leather jacket let out a low chuckle. He stepped forward, boots crunching on the river stones. He pushed his shoulders back, puffing his chest to display his size. "I am Maddox, future alpha of this territory. Stand up and submit." He pushed Alpha Command into his voice. The sound rolled through the clearing like a shockwave. A normal Omega would drop to her knees and bare her neck to the sky. Blair tilted her head. She picked at a speck of dirt on her fingernail. "Your voice cracked on the word alpha. You might want to get that checked out." Maddox stopped in his tracks. The amber rings in his irises burned bright, bleeding into the whites of his eyes. "Shut up," he muttered. "Excuse me?" Blair asked. "Not you," Maddox snapped. He slapped the side of his own head. "My wolf. He wants to bite you. I told him no." Blair stared at him. He argues with the beast out loud. He is out of his mind. The brother in the button-down shirt let out a long sigh. "Maddox, you embarrass us." He looked at Blair, his gaze analytical and sharp. "I am Cole. Leave the knife in your boot. You are coming with us to the pack house." "No thanks," Blair said. "I like this tree. It has character." Cole crossed his arms. "You smell like river water, but underneath that, you smell like exhaustion. You need food. We have a full kitchen. Come with us or my brother will try to drag you. And judging by your posture, you will stab him. Then I will have to carry his bleeding body back home. Save me the trouble." Blair looked at her muddy boots. Then she looked at the 2 giant men blocking her path. A free meal sounded better than freezing to death. She stood up, brushing the dirt off her jeans. "Fine," Blair said. "But if the crazy one tries to bite me, I aim for the throat." "Deal," Cole said. Maddox just growled at the moon. "Stop wagging your tail," he yelled at his own chest. Blair shook her head and walked past them, letting them lead the way through the thick forest. She kept her hand near her boot the entire walk. Chapter 2. The iron gates of the pack house towered over the cobblestone courtyard. Torches lined the stone walls, casting flickering light across the gathered crowd. Blair walked between the twins. She kept her chin up. Dozens of wolves stopped their conversations and stared at the intruder. An old man stood at the top of the courtyard steps. He leaned his weight on a thick wooden cane. His face twisted in disgust as Blair approached the stairs.
"What is this?"
the old man demanded. His voice echoed over the stones. "Found her in the woods, Elder Rurik," Maddox said. He stuffed his hands into his jacket pockets and shrugged. Rurik slammed his cane against the stairs. "We bury our Alpha King tomorrow. He died holding the border against our rivals, and you bring a filthy stray into our home? You should prepare for your journey. The rival pack offers a peace treaty. You will ride out at dawn, pick a noble bride from their ranks, and secure our borders." Cole stepped up the first 2 stairs. He looked down at the elder. "We will not marry the enemy. We do not reward murder with a wedding ring." "You must," Rurik shouted. Spit flew from his lips. "Or we go to war. A war we cannot win without an alpha on the throne." Blair crossed her arms. "They want to force a wedding to stop a war. Typical politicians." "Hey, old man," Blair called out. The courtyard went dead silent. Rurik's eyes bulged. "How dare you speak to me, Omega?" "Your plan is stupid," Blair said. "You think handing over your future alpha to the people who killed your king buys you peace? It buys you a leash. You will be their pets by winter." Rurik turned purple. The veins in his neck popped. "Guards, throw her back into the river!" 2 large guards stepped out of the shadows. Maddox moved in front of Blair. A low, rumbling growl tore from his chest. It vibrated through the courtyard. The guards froze in their tracks. "She stays," Maddox said. "She is a nobody," Rurik yelled. "She has no pack, no bloodline. She is dirt." Cole adjusted his shirt cuffs. He did not raise his voice, but the sound carried over the quiet crowd. "You are forgetting the law, Rurik. The moon goddess is clear. An alpha can choose any mate he desires to take the throne beside him. We choose her." Blair choked on her own spit. She grabbed Maddox's arm. "Wait, what?" "Shut up, my wolf likes you," Maddox told her. He hit his chest again. "Down, boy, let the adults talk." Rurik looked like he was going to pass out. He gripped his cane with white knuckles. "You cannot be serious. Both of you? Sharing a Luna?" "Yes," Cole said. His face remained a calm, unreadable mask. "She stays. Show her to the guest wing. We have a lot of planning to do before sunrise." Chapter 3. The guest room felt like a trap. A giant mahogany bed sat in the middle of the floor, covered in luxurious silk sheets. Blair ignored it. She paced the length of the woven rug, her muddy boots leaving tracks on the clean fabric. The heavy oak door swung open. Maddox and Cole walked in. Maddox shut the door and leaned his back against the wood. "Get out," Blair said. She stopped pacing and glared at them. Maddox threw himself onto a velvet sofa in the corner. The wooden frame creaked under his weight. "We just saved your life out there. A little gratitude goes a long way." "You just claimed me as a bride to piss off an old man," Blair shot back. "I am not a pawn on your chessboard. I do not belong to you." Cole walked over to the stone fireplace. The fire was unlit. He rested his arm on the mantel and watched her pace. "Rurik wants us to marry the daughters of the men who killed our father. We needed a distraction to buy time. You provided an excellent one. You are bold. You see the board clearly, and you do not back down." "I see 2 idiots," Blair said. Maddox laughed. He grabbed the armrests of the sofa. "I told you to shut up," he yelled. Blair jumped back, her hand dropping toward her left boot. "Are you yelling at me?" "No, my wolf." Maddox rubbed his temples. "He says you have fire. He wants to chase you around the room. I am trying to have a civilized conversation without shifting and breaking the furniture." "If I stay in this room, I will lose my mind." Blair stood her ground. She looked Cole in the eye. "I lost my pack to those same rivals 2 months ago. They burned my home to the dirt. I will not marry either of you. I do not want a crown, but I will help you ruin that peace treaty. I want them to hurt." Cole's eyes gleamed in the dim light. A slow, dangerous smile spread across his face. "A tactical alliance. I like the sound of that. You play the part of the smitten bride, and we use you to block Rurik's political moves." "I like the sound of her," Maddox mumbled to himself. "Knock it off," Cole told his brother. He turned back to Blair. "Rurik will not let this go. He will try to force you out of the territory. He has the council in his pocket. Be ready for tomorrow morning." "I was born ready," Blair said. She pointed at the heavy oak door. "Now leave. I want to sleep. Do not come back until the sun is up." Maddox stood up from the sofa. He gave her a smirk, his pupils dilating until no color remained, and walked out. Cole gave her a single nod before closing the door behind him. Blair locked the deadbolt, pulled the hunting knife from her boot, and slid it under her pillow before crashing onto the mattress. Chapter 4. The pack council room looked like an ancient amphitheater. Stone benches rose in steep tiers toward a vaulted ceiling. When Blair walked through the arched entrance the next morning, the room was packed to the brim. Whispers bounced off the stone walls, creating a dull roar. She wore the same muddy jeans and coat from the woods. She did not care about dressing up for a crowd that wanted her dead. Maddox and Cole stood in the center of the circular floor. Rurik stood on the highest tier, holding a rolled parchment in his wrinkled hand. "The moon goddess provides our laws," Rurik announced. His voice cut through the whispers. The room fell silent. "An alpha may choose his mate, but the pack must survive. This stray Omega brings no alliances. She brings no wealth. She brings no status. If she is to be our Luna, she must prove the goddess favors her presence." Cole narrowed his eyes. He crossed his arms over his chest. "What game are you playing, Rurik?" "The Luna trials," Rurik said. Loud gasps filled the room. Several elders shook their heads. Maddox bared his teeth. "You cannot invoke the trials. No one has survived them in a century. It is a death sentence." "It is the law!" Rurik yelled back, slamming his cane against the stone tier. "If she passes 3 trials, she proves her worth to the goddess. If she fails, she leaves these lands forever. And you two will ride to the rival border and marry the brides I selected for the treaty." Rurik looked down at Blair. He smiled a thin, nasty smile. "Do you accept the challenge, Stray? Or will you run back to the mud where you belong?" "He thinks I will break under the pressure." Blair stepped forward, leaving the twins behind her. She tilted her chin up. She ignored Rurik and looked directly at the crowd of wolves watching her from the benches. "I accept," Blair said. Her voice rang clear and confident across the stone room. "But when I win, you owe me a public apology. On your knees." Maddox let out a sharp bark of laughter. He clapped his hand over his mouth to muffle the sound. Rurik's face turned bright red. He unrolled the parchment. "Your first trial begins at noon. We have a bitter feud between the northern and eastern families over the hunting grounds. Blood has been spilled. You will solve the dispute before sunset, or you will leave." Blair turned her back on him and walked toward the exit. She passed the twins without slowing her pace. "Well," Cole murmured as she walked by, "you certainly know how to make an entrance." "Just watch me work," Blair said. Chapter 5. Noon sunlight poured through the arched windows of the guest room. Blair stood beside the giant mahogany bed. She lifted the silk pillow, grabbed her notched hunting knife, and wiped a speck of dust from the dull metal. She dropped to one knee and slid the blade deep into her left boot. The mud caked on her jeans had dried into stiff, gray crusts. She did not care. She shoved her arms into her worn coat and walked out the heavy oak door. The courtyard buzzed with restless energy. Dozens of wolves crowded the stone stairs, forming a tight circle around the center of the yard. Blair pushed her way through the mass of bodies. They parted for her, their eyes tracking the dried mud flaking off her boots onto the clean cobblestones. Elder Rurik stood on the highest step. He leaned his weight on his thick wooden cane, his knuckles white. To his right stood Maddox, his hands buried in the pockets of his worn leather jacket. To his left stood Cole, his dark button-down shirt crisp and unwrinkled. In the center of the ring, two groups of men glared at each other. The tension in the air threatened to snap. "The stray arrives," Rurik announced. He pointed his cane at the center of the courtyard. "Your first Luna trial begins now. Pay attention, Omega." Blair ignored his tone. She stopped at the edge of the circle and studied the men. The leader of the group on the left had a fresh, jagged claw mark across his cheek. The leader on the right favored his left leg, putting all his weight on his right boot. Rurik cleared his throat. "These are the heads of the northern and eastern families, Torin and Hale. For 3 generations, they have spilled blood over the Elk Ridge hunting grounds. The valley sits right on their border. Torin claims his grandfather claimed the ridge. Hale claims the river shifted, placing the ridge on eastern soil. Last night, Torin's men ambushed Hale's hunting party. 3 wolves sit in the infirmary." Torin bared his teeth. "Hale's men poached our deer." "The deer crossed the river," Hale shouted back, his hands balling into fists. "You drew first blood, Torin. I will rip your throat out for it." Maddox let out a low growl. He stepped forward, but Cole caught his shoulder. "Let her work," Cole murmured. "My wolf wants to break their jaws," Maddox muttered out loud, smacking his own chest. "Sit down. They are not our problem right now." Torin and Hale ignored the twins. They took a step toward each other. Their men followed, shoulders hunching, ready to shift and tear the courtyard apart. Rurik smiled a nasty, thin smile. He looked down at Blair. "The moon goddess demands peace within the pack. You have until sunset. Solve the Elk Ridge dispute. If another drop of blood hits these stones, you fail the trial. You leave our territory tonight. We will not help you." "He thinks they will rip me to pieces if I intervene." Blair rolled her shoulders. She stepped right between Torin and Hale. "Back off," Blair said. Torin looked down at her muddy coat. He scoffed. "A stray Omega tells me what to do? Go back to the woods, little girl. This is alpha business." "You smell like river sludge," Hale added, crossing his arms. "You have no rank here. Move, before you get trampled." Blair did not flinch. She stared Torin right in the eyes. Then she turned her head and stared at Hale. "You both look pathetic," Blair said, her voice carrying over the silent courtyard. Torin's eyes widened. "What did you say to me?" "I said you look pathetic," Blair repeated. She gestured to Torin's bleeding cheek. "You let a man with a bad limp scratch your face. And you," she pointed at Hale's leg, "you let a man with 0 spatial awareness ruin your knee. You call yourselves hunters? You look like toddlers fighting over a broken toy." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Maddox clapped a hand over his mouth to muffle a bark of laughter. Rurik gripped his cane, his face turning bright red. Torin stepped into Blair's space, towering over her. "I will snap your neck for that." Blair dropped her hand to her left boot, her fingers hovering an inch from her hidden knife. "Try it. See how fast you bleed out on these stones. Rurik gave me jurisdiction over this dispute. That means for the next few hours, I speak with the authority of the council. You will listen to me, or I will make sure neither of you ever hunts again." Hale narrowed his eyes. "You cannot threaten us. You have no power." "I have the trial," Blair said, a wicked spark lighting up her eyes. "And I have a plan to make Elk Ridge the most useless piece of dirt in this entire territory. Rurik, tell them the rules. If I issue a ruling, is it binding?" Rurik ground his teeth together. "It is binding. Until sunset." Blair turned back to the 2 furious pack leaders. "Now I close the trap." "Good. Give me 10 minutes. I will solve your 3-generation war right now." Chapter 6. Torin and Hale stared at Blair, their chests heaving with anger. The courtyard held its collective breath. Cole watched from the steps, his face a perfect, unreadable mask, but his eyes tracked Blair's every movement. Maddox leaned against the stone railing, a wide grin splitting his face. "You have 10 minutes, Stray," Torin spat. "Make your ruling. When it fails, we finish this fight." "Elkridge," Blair started, pacing a slow circle around the two men. Her muddy boots left faint tracks on the stone. "A prime hunting ground, rich soil, good tree cover. The deer flock there because the river bends around the base of the ridge, trapping the sweet grass. You both want it because it makes hunting easy." "It is our land!" Hale shouted. "Shut up, I am talking," Blair snapped. She stopped pacing and crossed her arms over her worn coat. "You fight because you both want the easy meat. You refuse to share. So here is my ruling." Blair looked up at Elder Rurik. "By the power granted to me under the Luna trials, I declare Elk Ridge a protected sanctuary. No hunting. By anyone." Silence dropped over the courtyard like a heavy blanket. Torin blinked. "What?" "You heard me," Blair said. "Since you two cannot share the playground without crying and scratching each other, I am taking the playground away. Elk Ridge is now off-limits to the northern and eastern families. In fact, it is off-limits to the entire pack. Any wolf caught hunting on that ridge will face immediate exile for breaking a Luna trial decree." "You cannot do that," Hale yelled, his face turning purple. "That is our primary food source for the winter." "Should have thought of that before you started an ambush," Blair fired back. "You have the rest of the valley. Hunt the hard way. Earn your meat." "This is madness," Torin snarled, turning to Rurik. "Elder, you cannot let this stray take our land." Rurik pounded his thick wooden cane against the stairs. "The decree is binding. She holds the trial authority." The old man glared at Blair, realizing she had found a way to punish the pack without shedding blood. "I am not finished," Blair said, her voice rising to reach the back rows of the crowd. "I will lift the sanctuary order on one condition." Torin and Hale snapped their attention back to her. "What condition?" they asked at the exact same time. Blair let a smug smile touch her lips. "You share it, but not by drawing lines on a map. You form a joint hunting party. Torin, you send your 3 best trackers. Hale, you send your 3 best strikers. You hunt Elk Ridge together, you pool the meat, and you split the harvest 50-50 between your families at the end of every week." "I will never hunt beside a northerner," Hale spat. "Then starve," Blair said. She turned her back on them and started walking toward the guest wing. "The sanctuary order stands. Enjoy eating scraps this winter." "Wait," Torin called out. Blair stopped. She looked over her shoulder. Torin rubbed his jaw, wincing as his fingers brushed the fresh claw mark. He looked at Hale. Hale glared back, but the anger in his eyes shifted to panic. Both men knew their families needed the Elk Ridge meat to survive the harsh months ahead. "If we form the joint party," Torin ground out, his voice thick with reluctance, "you lift the ban?" "Immediately," Blair said. "But if I hear about one fight, one argument, or one stolen piece of meat, the ban comes back permanently, and I will designate Elk Ridge as the official dumping ground for the pack's waste. You will smell rotting garbage from your front porches." Hale let out a long, defeated sigh. He held his hand out to Torin. "Fine. My strikers, your trackers, 50-50 split." Torin stared at the hand for a long moment. Then he gripped it and gave a single, firm shake. "Deal." The courtyard erupted into murmurs. Blair had broken a 3-generation blood feud in less than 10 minutes. She did not throw a punch. She did not use alpha command. She used pure, unfiltered logic and a heavy dose of humiliation. "Trial passed!" Maddox shouted, his voice booming over the crowd. He pushed himself off the stone railing. "My wolf says you are a genius. I agree with him." Rurik looked like he swallowed a lemon. He leaned heavy on his cane, refusing to make eye contact with Blair. Cole stepped down the stairs, his dark button-down shirt catching the midday sun. He walked right up to Blair. "A flawless maneuver. You weaponized their pride against their survival instincts. I just treated them like children, Blair said, because that is how they act. Come with me, Cole said, gesturing toward the main doors of the pack house. We need to talk, alone. Chapter 7. Cole led Blair through the winding corridors of the main pack house. She kept her hands stuffed in the pockets of her muddy coat, her boots thudding against the polished hardwood floors. Cole moved with silent, fluid steps. He pushed open a set of towering double doors and stepped aside. Blair walked in and stopped. The pack library stretched up 3 stories high. Sunlight filtered through stained glass skylights, illuminating millions of dust motes dancing in the air. Towering oak shelves lined the walls, packed tight with ancient, leather-bound books. Brass lamps sat on long mahogany reading tables. The room felt heavy with history and quiet power. Cole walked to the center table and unrolled a massive parchment map. He pinned the corners down with brass weights. You handled Torin and Hale with precision, Cole said. He rolled up the cuffs of his dark shirt, revealing lean, corded forearms. You proved to the Council you possess Luna capabilities. Rurik is scrambling to design a second trial that will actually break you. Blair walked over to the table. She stared at the map. It showed the pack's territory, the rivers, the mountains, and the borders of the rival clan that burned her home. Let him try. I survive. It is the only thing I know how to do. Cole rested his hands on the edge of the table. He looked up, locking his sharp gaze on her face. Survival is a baseline, Blair. I want to talk about control. I want to talk about strategy. I am not joining your chess game, Blair said. You are already on the board, Cole replied, his voice smooth and steady. Maddox leads with raw power. The pack respects his strength, but strength without direction causes chaos. I provide the direction. I move the pieces behind the scenes to keep the borders secure and the economy flowing. Rurik wants to ruin that balance with this forced rival marriage. Blair traced a finger over the rival pack's border on the map. So you want to use me as a shield to block the wedding? I want to build an alliance with you, Cole corrected. He tapped a specific ridge on the map. You possess a tactical mind. You proved it in the courtyard. If you stay, if you take the Luna title alongside Maddox, we create a perfect triad. Maddox brings the muscle. You bring the fire and the unpredictability. I bring the structure. We would be untouchable. He wants to put me in a box. Blair laughed, a genuine, sharp laugh that echoed off the high ceiling. Cole tilted his head. A fraction of his blank mask slipped, revealing a flicker of genuine confusion. You find a permanent home and absolute security funny? I find your obsession with control funny, Blair said. She leaned over the table, bringing her face inches from his. You think you can map out every outcome. You think people are just pieces of wood you can slide across a board. But wolves are messy, Cole. The world is messy. Structure prevents disaster, Cole argued. Structure creates cages, Blair shot back. I spent 2 months running through the mud because a pack with a perfect strategy decided my home looked better as ashes. I do not want to be your secret weapon. I do not want to manage your spreadsheets. I just want Rurik to choke on his own rules. Cole stared at her. The air between them grew thick and heavy. He did not yell. He did not growl. He just watched her, his analytical mind working at lightning speed to reevaluate the woman standing in front of him. You reject the safety I offer, Cole said, his tone dropping an octave. I reject the leash, Blair corrected. She stood up straight and turned toward the doors. I will beat Rurik's trials because I hate him. I will help you ruin the peace treaty because I want the rival pack to suffer. But do not ever think you can manage me, Cole. I am a stray. I bite. She walked out of the library without looking back. Cole remained at the table. He looked down at the map, then to the muddy boot prints Blair left on the polished floor. A slow, undeniable smirk touched the corner of his mouth. Unpredictable, Cole murmured to the empty room. Fascinating. Chapter 8. The sun dipped below the tree line, casting long, dark shadows across the guest room. Blair sat on the edge of the mahogany bed. She stared at the unlit stone fireplace. The events of the day drained her energy. Beating the pack leaders took mental focus, and arguing with Cole took the rest of her patience. A heavy knock rattled the oak door. Before Blair could speak, the handle turned. Maddox walked in. He wore the same worn leather jacket. He shut the door with a firm click and leaned his back against the wood. In his right hand, he held a long, rectangular wooden box. "I know how to knock," Maddox said, pointing at the door. "My wolf just refused to wait for an answer. He has 0 manners." Blair sighed. She rested her hands on her muddy jeans. "What do you want, Maddox?" Maddox pushed off the door and walked to the center of the woven rug. He stopped right in front of her. The sheer size of him blocked the little light left in the room. He held the wooden box out. "For you," he said. Blair looked at the box. She did not reach for it. "I told Cole I do not accept bribes. I am not joining your little strategy team, and I am not taking handouts." Maddox scoffed. "Cole overthinks everything. He uses words to hide his hands. I don't play games. Open the box." "If it is a necklace or a dress, I will throw it in the fireplace." Blair reached out and took the box. It felt heavy. She flipped the metal latch and lifted the lid. Resting on a bed of dark velvet lay a custom hunting knife. Blair stopped breathing for a second. The craftsmanship demanded total attention. The blade featured Damascus steel, the dark and light metals folded over each other in a flawless, rippling pattern. The edge gleamed, razor-sharp and deadly. A solid piece of carved stag bone formed the handle, wrapped tightly in dark, hand-tooled leather for a perfect grip. A matching leather sheath sat beside it, reinforced with heavy stitching. The quality spoke of staggering wealth and master blacksmithing. It made her notched, dull blade look like a piece of scrap metal. "My wolf noticed you favor your left boot," Maddox said, his voice a low rumble. "He also noticed your current blade is garbage. You cannot fight a rival pack with a dull edge, so I had the forge master finish this. The steel will never break." Blair stared at the weapon. Her fingers twitched, wanting to trace the bone handle. It was the most beautiful tool she had ever seen. She snapped the wooden lid shut. She held the box back out to him. "No," Blair said. Maddox blinked. His eyes widened in genuine shock. "What do you mean, no? It is perfect for your grip." "I know it is," Blair said, keeping her arm extended. "But I earn my tools. I earn my keep. If I take this now, I owe you. I do not owe anyone anything." Maddox stared at the box. He slapped his free hand against his chest. "I told you she wouldn't take it. Stop whining at me. She has pride." Blair let out a sharp breath. "Are you always this exhausting?" "Only on weekdays," Maddox shot back. He grabbed the wooden box from her hands. He did not look angry. He looked impressed. "You turned down Cole's master plan, and you turned down a master-forged blade in the same afternoon. You really are a stray." "I take care of myself," Blair said. "I know," Maddox said. He took a step closer. The air between them suddenly felt charged and heavy. He looked down at her, his amber irises burning bright. "You don't want a cage. You don't want a bribe. You just want to fight. I respect that, Blair. I respect raw honesty." He stepped back and set the wooden box on the mantel above the unlit fireplace. "I will leave it here," Maddox said, walking backward toward the door. "When you feel like you earned it, put it in your boot. Until then, my wolf will just have to suffer." He flashed a wild, sharp grin and slipped out the door. Blair stared at the wooden box on the mantel. She reached down, touched the familiar shape of her notched knife hidden in her boot, and smiled. Chapter 9. Morning light pierced the arched windows of the pack council room, casting harsh, angled shadows across the steep stone tiers. The ancient amphitheater hummed with frantic energy. Dozens of elders paced the upper levels, their whispers blending into a low, nervous drone. Blair stood on the center floor. She wore the same muddy jeans and her worn coat. The mud on her boots had hardened into solid gray shells, leaving faint dust prints on the smooth stone beneath her feet. She kept her hands stuffed deep in her pockets, her right index finger tapping a steady rhythm against her thigh. Cole stood to her left, his dark button-down shirt crisp, his cuffs rolled up to his elbows. He watched the room, his face an unreadable mask, calculating every whisper. Maddox paced on her right. His worn leather jacket creaked with every sharp turn. Elder Rurik stood on the highest tier, his knuckles bone-white as he gripped his thick wooden cane. "Silence!" Rurik roared, slamming his cane against the stone floor. The sharp crack echoed through the vaulted ceiling. The elders froze. "Our scouts returned from the eastern border an hour ago. The perimeter is breached. The rival pack crossed the river." A wave of panic rippled through the gathered wolves. "They know," Rurik continued, turning his furious gaze down to Blair. "They know our future alphas rejected their noble bride for a stray. They take it as a declaration of war. They test our defenses, looking for the weakest point to strike." Maddox stopped pacing. He tilted his head back, his pupils dilating until no color remained in his eyes. A low, rumbling growl vibrated in his chest. "Let them cross. I will break their jaws and stack them at the riverbank." He smacked his own chest. "Yes, and bite off their ears. Good idea, buddy." A few elders exchanged nervous glances. Maddox, arguing with his inner wolf in the middle of a war council, did little to calm their fears. Cole adjusted his cuffs. "A defensive perimeter is the smart play. We pull the outer patrols in, consolidate our forces around the valley, and force them into a bottleneck at Elk Ridge." "Wrong!" Rurik shouted, pointing a trembling finger at Cole. "We do not cower in our own lands. The pack needs to see strength, and the moon goddess demands the Luna trials continue." Blair rolled her eyes. "You want to throw a trial in the middle of a border skirmish? You are losing your touch, old man. Panic makes you sloppy." Rurik's face flushed a deep, violent red. "You brought this war to our doorstep, Omega. You will face the consequences. Trial 2 begins right now. The Luna must know the lands she claims to protect. She must map the threats. You will march to the eastern border. You will track the rival scouts. You will document every breach in our defenses." Gasps erupted from the stone benches. Maddox bared his teeth. He took a threatening step toward the stairs. "That is a suicide mission. You send an Omega into a pack of rival scouts, they will tear her apart. I will rip your throat out before I let that happen." "It is the trial," Rurik yelled, his voice cracking with desperation. "She accepts, or she fails and leaves our territory by noon." Cole grabbed Maddox's shoulder, holding his brother back. "Rurik expects you to refuse, Blair. He wants you to run. If you walk out those doors, he wins. The treaty happens. The rival pack takes control of our borders from the inside." Blair looked at the furious elder. Then she looked at the map table sitting in the corner of the room. 2 months ago, those same rival wolves burned her home. They chased her through the mud, forced her to eat scraps, and made her sleep in the freezing rain. She pulled her hands out of her pockets. She rested her weight on her right leg. "I accept," Blair said, her voice cutting through the heavy silence of the room. Rurik blinked, his confidence wavering for a split second. "You will go alone." "The rules say nothing about an escort," Cole countered, his voice smooth and authoritative. "The alpha candidates must oversee the trials to verify the results. We walk with her." Maddox let out a sharp bark of laughter. "Try to stop me, old man. My wolf wants to hunt." "Fine," Rurik spat, gripping his cane. "Map the border, track the scouts. Do not return until you find their crossing point. If you run, stray, do not bother coming back." Blair turned her back on the elder. She walked toward the grand archway leading out of the council room. She stopped next to Maddox, her muddy boots planting firm on the stone. "Let's go," Blair said. "I know how these cowards operate. We track them, we map the breach, and we make them regret crossing the river." Maddox grinned, revealing sharp white teeth. Cole gave a single, firm nod. The triad marched out of the room, leaving Rurik to stew in his own rage. Chapter 10. Thick, gray clouds blocked the sun, casting a gloomy haze over the eastern woods. The forest floor was a chaotic mess of rotting leaves, twisted roots, and deep, freezing mud. Blair pushed through a dense thicket of thorns. Her worn coat snagged on a branch, but she yanked it free, ignoring the tearing sound. She kept her breathing steady, her eyes scanning the dark spaces between the ancient pine trees. Her left hand hovered near her boot, ready to draw her notched hunting knife at the first sign of movement. Maddox walked point, his heavy boots crushing fallen branches. He paused every few steps, flaring his nostrils to pull scents from the cold air. Beside him, Cole moved like a ghost. His dark button-down shirt blended into the shadows, and his footsteps made zero sound on the forest floor. "We are getting close," Maddox murmured. He stopped and crouched next to a massive oak tree. He ran a finger over the bark. Deep, vertical gouges scored the wood. "Fresh claw marks, warning signs. They mark this territory as their own." "Arrogant," Cole said. He knelt beside Maddox and studied the dirt. "They travel in a pack of 5, heavy steps. Alpha enforcers, not standard scouts. Rurik sent us into an execution squad." Blair stepped up behind them. She crouched down, her muddy jeans soaking up the damp earth. She looked at the paw prints pressed into the mud. "They drag their back paws," Blair noted, pointing to a long smear in the dirt behind one of the prints. "They ran a long distance before crossing the river. They are tired. Tired wolves make mistakes." Maddox snapped his head toward her, his pupils dilating into endless black pools. "My wolf likes how your brain works. He says we should let you lead." "Tell him thanks, but I prefer the middle of the pack," Blair said. She stood up, brushing wet pine needles off her coat. "If they are alpha enforcers, they will not run from a fight. They want a trophy to take back to their leader." "They want you," Cole clarified. He stood up and scanned the tree line. The rejected bride was a severe insult. Taking the stray who replaced her restores their honor. "We need a tactical retreat. We found the breach. The trial requirements are met." Maddox let out a harsh, rumbling growl. "We do not retreat. We hunt." "Hunting 5 enforcers with 3 people is bad math, Maddox," Cole fired back, his calm mask slipping just a fraction. "This is not a bar brawl. This is a coordinated enemy unit." "I don't care about math," Maddox shouted, smacking his chest. "Stop pacing in there. I know they smell bad. I am trying to focus." Blair sighed, reaching down to tap the handle of her knife inside her boot. "You two need to stop arguing. You are broadcasting our location to the entire forest." A loud, sharp snap echoed through the trees to their right. All 3 of them froze. The wind shifted, carrying a foul, pungent stench of rotting meat and wet ash. It was the unmistakable scent of the rival pack. "Too late," Cole whispered. 5 massive wolves melted out of the shadows, forming a perfect half-circle around them. Their fur was matted and dark, their eyes glowing with predatory malice. The leader, a hulking beast with a scarred snout, let out a deafening snarl that shook the leaves on the branches above. Maddox cracked his neck. A vicious, thrilled smile spread across his face. "Finally, I was getting bored." "Protect the stray," Cole ordered, shifting his stance. Blair pulled her hands out of her pockets. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic drumbeat of pure adrenaline. She remembered the fire. She remembered the smoke filling her lungs when these monsters burned her home. She remembered 2 months of eating scraps and sleeping in the freezing mud. Fear vanished. Pure, burning rage took its place. "I don't need protection," Blair said. She unbuttoned her worn coat and let it drop to the forest floor. She kicked off her heavy, mud-caked boots. Maddox threw his head back and roared. His bones cracked and shifted in a brutal, violent symphony. His leather jacket ripped at the seams as thick, dark fur erupted from his skin. In seconds, a giant, terrifying black wolf stood in his place. Cole moved with terrifying grace. His shift was fluid, silent. His dark shirt tore away, revealing a sleek, muscular gray wolf built for lethal speed. The rival enforcers lunged forward, jaws snapping, ready to tear the twins apart. Blair did not run. She did not hide behind the trees. She embraced the burn in her blood, letting the shift overtake her. Her bones snapped and reshaped. Her vision sharpened. She dropped to all fours, her pale silver fur catching the dim light piercing the forest canopy. The Omega was ready for war. Chapter 11. The forest erupted into chaos. Maddox met the rival leader head-on. The impact sounded like two boulders colliding in midair. Maddox sank his massive jaws into the leader's shoulder, using sheer brute force to lift the enemy wolf off his paws and slam him into the trunk of a pine tree. The wood splintered. Bark rained down on the muddy forest floor. Cole became a gray blur. He darted between the trees, using his superior speed to disorient two of the enforcers. He snapped at their heels, driving them into each other, letting their own momentum work against them. Blair stayed low. Her pale Omega form was smaller than the Alpha warriors, lacking their crushing weight. But she possessed unmatched agility. She darted through the underbrush, her paws barely making a sound against the damp earth. A fourth rival wolf spotted her. He abandoned the fight with the twins and charged Blair, snapping his blood-stained teeth. Blair did not retreat. She waited until the beast was 2 feet away, then dropped her shoulder and slid through the freezing mud. The enforcer sailed over her head, his jaws snapping shut on empty air. Blair twisted her spine, kicked off a thick tree root, and launched herself at his exposed flank. She sank her teeth into his hind leg, ripping backward with all her strength. The enforcer howled in agony. His leg buckled, sending him crashing face first into the dirt. Blair released her grip, vaulted over his thrashing body, and sprinted back toward the center of the skirmish. Maddox had the leader pinned, his dark fur slick with the enemy's blood. The leader whined, his throat exposed, submitting to Maddox's crushing dominance. But Cole was in trouble. Cole had his two opponents cornered against a rock wall, his tactical mind keeping them trapped. He did not see the fifth enforcer creeping through the tall ferns behind him. The fifth wolf coiled its muscles, preparing a lethal blindside strike aimed right at Cole's spine. "No!" Blair pushed her legs to the absolute limit. Her silver fur became a streak of moonlight in the dark woods. The fifth enforcer launched himself into the air, aiming for Cole's back. Blair intercepted him mid-flight. She slammed her body against his ribs with the force of a battering ram. The impact knocked the breath from her lungs. Both wolves tumbled through the air, crashing hard into a cluster of jagged rocks. Pain flared down Blair's left arm. A sharp stone sliced a deep, jagged gash across her bicep. She ignored the burning sting. She scrambled to her feet, placing herself right between the stunned enforcer and Cole. She bared her teeth, letting out a ferocious, high-pitched snarl that demanded attention. Cole whipped his head around, his gray ears flattening against his skull. He saw the fifth enforcer staggering to his feet. He saw Blair standing guard, her fur stained with fresh blood. The analytical mask broke. Pure alpha fury took over. Cole lunged past Blair. He hit the fifth enforcer with terrifying precision, snapping his jaws shut around the enemy's neck. One violent twist, and the enforcer went limp, unconscious. The two wolves Cole had trapped against the wall took one look at their fallen comrades and ran. They bolted into the thick trees, their tails tucked between their legs. Maddox released the leader. He let out a booming, victorious howl that rattled the branches above. The leader scrambled away, dragging his injured leg, desperate to reach the river and cross the border. The woods fell silent. The only sound was the harsh, ragged breathing of 3 victorious wolves. Blair dropped to the mud. The adrenaline crashed, leaving her limbs shaking and heavy. She closed her eyes and let the shift reverse. Bones cracked, muscles reshaped. She sat in the freezing mud in her human form. She reached over, grabbed her torn, worn coat from the dirt, and shoved her arms into the sleeves to block the cold. She quickly pulled her muddy boots back onto her feet. She looked down at her left arm. A long, jagged scratch bled down her skin, staining her sleeve. Maddox and Cole shifted back. Maddox ignored his ruined leather jacket. He walked straight to Blair, his chest heaving, his amber eyes burning with a wild, undeniable respect. Cole stood a few paces back, his dark shirt torn at the collar, his eyes locked on the silver Omega who just saved his life. "You fight," Maddox breathed out, wiping a smear of blood from his own jaw. "I told you," Blair said, her voice raspy. She gripped her bleeding arm. "I do not hide." Chapter 12. The walk back to the pack house felt like a march through thick water. The adrenaline faded, leaving Blair with a deep, throbbing ache in her bones and a burning sting in her left arm. She kept her jaw locked tight, refusing to let a single groan escape her lips. She dragged her muddy boots across the stone courtyard, ignoring the shocked stares of the guards stationed at the heavy iron gates. Maddox stayed glued to her right side, his presence a solid, intimidating wall against the whispering crowd. Cole walked behind them, his gaze scanning the shadows, his tactical mind analyzing the aftermath of the skirmish. They reached the guest wing in silence. Blair pushed open the heavy oak door and walked into the quiet room. The stone fireplace remained unlit, offering no warmth against the evening chill. The rectangular wooden box still sat untouched on the mantel. Blair dropped onto the velvet sofa. The frame creaked in protest. She let her head fall back against the cushions and closed her eyes. "Stay here," Maddox ordered. His boots thudded against the woven rug as he left the room. Cole stepped inside. He did not sit. He leaned his shoulder against the doorframe, crossing his arms over his torn, dark shirt. He watched Blair, his unreadable mask firmly back in place, but his eyes held a new, intense weight. "You risked your spine for a blindside attack," Cole said, his voice quiet, filling the empty space. "Tactically, it was a reckless maneuver. You lack the bone density to take a hit like that from an alpha enforcer." Blair kept her eyes closed. "You are welcome, Cole." Cole fell silent. He looked down at the floorboards, a muscle jumping in his jaw. "I did not account for the 5th wolf. My focus narrowed. It was a strategic failure on my part. You covered my blind spot." "Wolves are messy, Cole," Blair repeated her words from the library. "Plans fail. You improvise or you die." Footsteps echoed in the hallway. Maddox returned, holding a white ceramic basin filled with warm water and a clean, folded towel. He walked straight to the sofa and dropped to his knees in front of Blair. The sheer size of him dwarfed the furniture. He set the basin on the floor. He reached out and gently took Blair's left arm. Blair opened her eyes. She flinched as his large, calloused fingers brushed the skin near the jagged scratch. "Hold still," Maddox murmured. The wild, chaotic energy that usually radiated from him vanished. His amber eyes were clear, focused entirely on the wound. "My wolf hates the smell of your blood. It makes him crazy." He dipped the cloth into the warm water, wrung it out, and pressed it against her bicep. Blair hissed, her fingers curling into fists against her muddy jeans. Maddox did not flinch. He cleaned the blood with slow, deliberate strokes. His touch held surprising gentleness, a sharp contrast to the monster that just crushed an enemy leader against a pine tree. "You should have stayed behind Cole," Maddox grumbled, rinsing the cloth in the basin. "I handle the muscle. You map the trees. That was the deal." "I don't stand on the sidelines while my pack fights," Blair shot back, her voice tight with pain. Maddox stopped. He looked up, his eyes locking onto hers. The air in the room grew thick, heavy with sudden, undeniable tension. My pack. The words hung in the space between them. Blair swallowed hard. She spent 2 months running, belonging to no one, claiming no land. In the heat of the fight, instinct took over and she claimed the twins as her own. Maddox leaned closer, his gaze dropping to her lips for a fraction of a second. The scent of damp cedar and rain surrounded her, drowning out the smell of blood and mud. His thumb traced a slow, comforting circle against the uninjured skin of her forearm. Blair did not pull away. Her heart kicked up a frantic rhythm against her ribs. Cole stood frozen in the doorway. He watched his brother's hand linger on Blair's skin. He saw the walls around the stray Omega crumble just a fraction under Maddox's raw, unfiltered honesty. Cole analyzed the board, reading the invisible lines of connection drawing the fighter and the stray together. The strategist realized he lost the game of hearts before he even made his first move. Cole pushed off the doorframe. He took a silent step backward, slipping out into the dark hallway, leaving the two of them alone in the quiet room. Chapter 13. A sharp knock rattled the heavy oak door. Maddox stood up from the floor, leaving the white ceramic basin and the bloody towel on the woven rug. He pulled the door open. A pat guard stood in the hallway. The guard stared at Maddox's ruined leather jacket and the thick coat of enemy blood covering his hands and jaw. "Elder Rurik demands your presence in the council room," the guard said, keeping his distance. "Now." Maddox let out a low growl. "Tell the old man to wait. She needs rest." Blair pushed herself off the velvet sofa. The frame creaked under the sudden shift in weight. The jagged gash on her left bicep burned like a hot iron. She grabbed her torn, worn coat and pulled it over her shoulders, wincing as the rough fabric brushed her raw skin. "I can walk," Blair said. "Let's go." Cole waited in the corridor. His dark button-down shirt featured a torn collar from the skirmish in the woods. He watched Blair favor her left arm, his unreadable mask firmly in place. "You require stitches." "I require a nap," Blair corrected. "But Rurik comes first." They marched through the winding corridors of the main house. Pack members lined the walls, stopping their conversations to stare at the blood coating the returning triad. Fear rolled off the crowd in tangible waves. They entered the ancient amphitheater. Torches cast long, flickering shadows across the steep stone benches. Hundreds of wolves packed the room, their murmurs bouncing off the vaulted ceiling. Elder Rurik stood on the highest tier. He gripped his thick wooden cane, his knuckles bone white. His face twisted into a mask of pure rage. "You bring war to our doorstep," Rurik roared. The sound commanded total silence from the crowd. Cole stepped into the center of the circular floor. "We survived an ambush. 5 Alpha enforcers crossed the Eastern River. We neutralized the threat and secured the border." Rurik slammed his cane against the stone. "You provoked them. They offered a peace treaty. You rejected their bride, claimed a stray, and now you slaughter their scouts. The rival Alpha promises to burn this valley to ash by morning." Maddox wiped a smear of dried blood from his cheek. He bared his teeth at the elder. "Let him try. I will mount his head on the front gates." Panicked whispers ripped through the benches. The elders exchanged terrified looks. Rurik pointed a trembling finger at Blair. "This is her fault. She carries the stench of a ruined clan. She drags their wrath to our home. We have one option left to save our people." Blair narrowed her eyes. She stood her ground, despite the throbbing pain in her arm. "Say it, old man." "We hand you over," Rurik declared. "We deliver you to the rival Alpha at dawn, a trade for peace, the stray for the survival of the pack." Silence dropped over the amphitheater like a heavy stone. Blair did not flinch. She expected betrayal. 2 months in the wild taught her that survival always came at a cost. She rested her right hand over her bleeding left bicep and looked at Maddox. Maddox stopped breathing. The amber rings in his irises bled into the whites of his eyes. Chapter 14. Maddox snapped. He stalked up the stone stairs. His ruined leather jacket creaked with every sharp movement. He ignored the council members scrambling out of his path. He marched straight toward the highest tier, his boots thudding against the rock. "Maddox, hold your temper," Cole warned from the center floor. Maddox ignored his brother. He reached the top step and crowded Rurik's personal space. The old man shrank back, raising his thick wooden cane as a barrier between them. "Hand her over," Maddox whispered. The dangerous rumble vibrated through the entire room. "You want to throw my Luna to the wolves who burned her home?" "It is the only way to stop the bloodshed," Rurik shouted, his voice cracking with desperation. Maddox grabbed the wooden cane. He yanked the timber out of Rurik's grip and snapped it over his knee like a dry twig. He tossed the splintered pieces over the stone balcony. They clattered against the floorboards below. "My wolf wants to rip your throat out," Maddox snarled, flashing his sharp white teeth. "He says you smell like dust and cowardice, and for the first time today, I agree with him." "Treason!" Rurik gasped, stumbling back against the wall. "Guards! Arrest him!" 10 loyalist guards drew their steel blades. They stepped forward, forming a perimeter around the elder. Cole moved. He ascended the stairs, his torn collar flapping. He stood beside Maddox, facing the drawn swords. "Put the weapons down. You cannot fight future alphas." "They bring our doom," a loyalist yelled. From the lower benches, Torin stood up. The northern family leader traced the jagged claw mark across his cheek. "The Stray solved the Elk Ridge dispute. She gave us a winter harvest. I do not hand over wolves who feed my family." Hale stood up next to him, favoring his bad left knee. "The Eastern family stands with the Stray." Dozens of hunters drew their own weapons, rallying behind Torin and Hale. The amphitheater transformed into a powder keg. Blades reflected the torchlight. Family turned against family. The pack split in half. Blair watched from the center floor. The gash on her arm throbbed. Her presence shattered their fragile politics. "Stop!" Blair yelled. "Put the knives away! You look like idiots!" No one listened. Maddox stepped toward the closest loyalist guard, his claws extending from his fingertips. A deafening blast shattered the argument. The booming sound of the perimeter war horn echoed across the valley. One long blast, then a second, then a third. Cole turned his head toward the arched windows. 3 blasts, a full breach. A scout burst through the grand archway, his face pale, his chest heaving for air. "They are here!" the scout screamed. "The rival pack is at the main gates!" Chapter 15. The amphitheater descended into total chaos. The internal civil war evaporated in an instant. Blades lowered. Rurik turned the color of chalk. "To the courtyard!" Cole ordered. His voice cut through the panic like a whip. "Archers to the high walls! Torin, Hale, flank the main entrance with your strikers!" The wolves poured out of the council room. A tidal wave of bodies rushed through the winding corridors. Blair ran with them. Her muddy boots pounded against the hardwood floors. Her torn coat flapped behind her. The pain in her left bicep radiated down to her fingertips, but she ignored the burn. They reached the front courtyard. The night air held a freezing bite. Torches lined the towering stone walls, casting flickering orange light over the cobblestones. A terrifying crash shook the ground. The heavy iron gates groaned. Dust fell from the stone archway. Outside, a chorus of vicious, bloodthirsty howls rose into the dark sky. The rival pack brought an army. "Brace the doors!" Cole shouted. He pointed to a stack of thick timber beams. 10 warriors rushed forward, hauling the heavy wood to reinforce the buckling iron. Maddox stood in the center of the courtyard. He rolled his shoulders. His ruined leather jacket hung in shreds. He cracked his neck, preparing for the violent shift. He turned to Blair. He looked at the fresh blood seeping through her torn coat sleeve. "Go back to the guest wing," Maddox commanded. "Lock the oak door. Do not come out until I say so." Blair glared at him. "I do not hide in bedrooms while my pack fights." Another crash rocked the gates. One of the iron hinges snapped. A metal shard flew across the courtyard, embedding itself in a wooden cart. "You are injured," Maddox yelled over the din. "Your left arm is useless. You cannot fight alpha enforcers with one good arm and a dull piece of scrap metal." He pointed at her left boot, referencing her notched hunting knife. "My wolf says you stay safe." Maddox smacked his chest. "Yes, I told her. Shut up, we have a war to fight." Cole ran past them, his dark shirt stained with sweat. "The hinges are failing. Maddox, get to the front line." Maddox gave Blair one last pleading look. "Please, for once in your life, listen to me." He turned and sprinted toward the gates, his body already shifting, thick black fur erupting from his skin. Blair stood in the courtyard. The wind shifted, carrying the stench of rotting meat and wet ash from the rival pack outside. She looked at her left boot. Maddox told the truth. Her notched knife lacked the edge to pierce an alpha hide. She spun on her heel and sprinted toward the guest wing. Chapter 16. Blair burst through the heavy oak door. The guest room sat quiet, a stark contrast to the screaming courtyard. The unlit stone fireplace offered zero comfort. The white ceramic basin and the bloody towel sat on the woven rug, a reminder of her weakness. She ignored the basin. She marched straight to the mantel. The rectangular wooden box sat in the shadows. She flipped the metal latch. The lid opened. The custom Damascus steel hunting knife rested on the dark velvet. The folded metal blade gleamed in the dim light. The carved stagbone handle waited for a grip. Maddox said she could take it when she earned it. She bled for this pack in the woods. She stood her ground against the council. She earned her place. Blair pulled her dull, notched knife from her left boot. She dropped the useless scrap metal onto the mantel. She lifted the Damascus blade. The balance felt flawless in her palm. She slid the weapon into the matching leather sheath, secured it to her belt, and sprinted out the door. She hit the courtyard just as the iron gates exploded inward. Metal shattered against cobblestone. Screams filled the freezing air. Dozens of hulking rival wolves poured through the archway, their jaws snapping, their eyes wild with bloodlust. The courtyard turned into a slaughterhouse. Cole stood on a stone barricade in his human form, barking tactical orders, directing Torrens trackers to target the enemy flanks. Maddox operated as a giant black terror. He tore through the front line, his heavy jaws crushing bone. He tossed a rival wolf aside like a rag doll, but the enemy numbers proved too great. 3 rival enforcers swarmed Maddox, using their combined weight to pin the black wolf to the cobblestones. A 4th rival wolf spotted Cole giving orders. The enemy charged the barricade, leaping through the air, aiming for Cole's throat. Blair did not hesitate. The scent of crushed mint and damp earth flared into the air as she pushed her legs to the breaking point. She launched herself off a wooden cart, intercepting the leaping enemy. She drew the Damascus steel knife mid-air. She drove the stagbone handle forward, sinking the razor-sharp steel deep into the rival wolf's shoulder. The enemy howled in agony. They crashed to the cobblestones together. Blair rolled to her feet. Her left bicep screamed in pain, but her right hand gripped the flawless weapon. She stood between Cole and the wounded enemy. Cole looked down from the barricade, his eyes widening at the sight of her holding the custom blade. He gave her a single nod of respect. Then, Cole dove off the barricade. His bones cracked mid-air, his torn dark shirt shredding away as he shifted into his sleek gray wolf form. He crashed into the 3 enforcers pinning his brother, tearing them off Maddox. Both alphas stood side by side in their wolf forms, facing the invading army. Blair watched them. She belonged with them on the front line. She dropped the Damascus knife to the cobblestones. She threw off her heavy coat and kicked away her boots. She embraced the burn in her blood. Her bones snapped and reshaped. Her silver fur erupted in the moonlight. She let out a piercing howl and charged into the fray, fighting right alongside her alphas as an unstoppable three-wolf unit. Chapter 17. Blair hit the cobblestones. Her paws skidded against the slick, blood-stained rock. The jagged gash on her left bicep burned, a sharp flare of agony radiating down to her joints, but the battle frenzy drowned the pain. She let out a piercing howl that cut through the clash of steel and the roar of the invading army. Maddox and Cole heard her. The giant black wolf and the sleek gray wolf turned their heads, their jaws dripping with enemy blood. They did not push her away. They shifted their stances, opening a space right between them. The triad formed. Blair darted into the center. She dropped low, her silver fur blending with the moonlight reflecting off the shattered iron gates. 5 rival enforcers charged the barricade. Maddox took the brunt of the assault, launching his dark bulk forward. He met the first 2 enemies head-on, his heavy jaws snapping bone, tossing them aside. Cole flanked the right. He used the overturned wooden cart as a springboard, launching himself over a rival striker. He twisted mid-air, sinking his teeth into the enemy's spine and driving the beast straight into the dirt. Blair guarded their blind spots. A rival scout tried to slip past Maddox, aiming for the black wolf's exposed flank. Blair intercepted. She pushed her legs to the limit, sliding under the scout's snapping jaws. She kicked upward, her back paws catching the enemy under the jaw, sending the scout flipping backward onto the hard stones. Torin and Hale held the perimeter. Torin's trackers rained arrows down from the high walls, pinning the enemy reinforcements at the archway. Hale's strikers formed a shield wall of pure muscle, blocking the courtyard exits. The rival army faltered. They expected divided leadership and a weak defense. Instead, they faced an unbreakable 3-wolf unit operating with lethal precision. A deafening roar rattled the torches on the walls. The crowd of enemy wolves parted. The rival alpha stepped through the broken iron gates. He was a terrifying beast. Scars crisscrossed his graying muzzle. He lacked a left ear, a trophy lost in some ancient border war. His eyes burned with predatory malice. He locked his gaze on Maddox. The rival alpha wanted the crown. Maddox stepped forward. He let out a low, rumbling growl that vibrated through the cobblestones. He signaled Cole and Blair with a sharp flick of his tail. "Hold the line. This fight belongs to me." Cole stepped back, positioning himself between Blair and the remaining enemy enforcers. The rival alpha charged. Maddox met him in the dead center of the courtyard. The impact sounded like thunder. Both giant beasts rolled across the stones, a blur of dark and gray fur, snapping teeth and tearing claws. The rival alpha used his veteran weight, pinning Maddox to the ground, aiming a lethal bite at Maddox's throat. Maddox did not panic. He embraced the pain. He brought his back legs up, digging his claws into the rival alpha's stomach, and kicked with bone-crushing force. The rival alpha flew over Maddox's head, crashing into the stone barricade. Wood splintered, dust plumed into the night air. Maddox scrambled to his feet. He did not give the enemy a second to recover. He lunged, his jaws opening wide. He clamped his teeth down on the rival alpha's throat. He did not rip the flesh. He applied crushing pressure, forcing the older wolf's head back against the jagged rocks of the barricade. The rival alpha thrashed, his claws scraping useless paths across the cobblestones. Maddox tightened his grip. The message was clear: submit or die. The rival alpha's eyes widened in fear. His thrashing slowed. He dropped his tail between his legs and let out a high, sharp whine of total surrender. Silence swept across the courtyard. The invading army dropped to their bellies, baring their necks to the victorious black wolf. The siege was over. Chapter 18. Maddox released his grip. He took a step back, his chest heaving, his dark fur slick with sweat and enemy blood. He stared down at the defeated rival alpha. "Get out of my territory," Maddox growled, his voice a distorted rumble of alpha command. The scarred rival scrambled to his paws. He kept his head low, refusing to meet Maddox's gaze. He turned and limped toward the broken iron gates. His defeated army followed, a silent parade of broken pride shuffling out of the courtyard and disappearing into the tree line. Blair let the adrenaline crash. The pain in her left arm flared with a vengeance. She closed her eyes and let the shift reverse. Bones cracked, muscles reshaped. She collapsed onto the cold cobblestones in her human form. She reached out with her right hand and grabbed her torn, worn coat from the dirt. She pulled the heavy fabric over her shoulders, shivering against the night chill, and shoved her freezing feet back into her discarded boots. A few feet away, her dropped belt and the custom Damascus steel knife caught the torchlight. She crawled forward, grabbed the leather strap, and tied the belt firmly over her coat, securing the flawless weapon at her hip. Maddox and Cole shifted back. Maddox stood bare-chested in the center of the yard. His ruined leather jacket was gone, shredded during the transformation. Cole brushed dust off his dark trousers, his button-down shirt a casualty of the fight as well. Torin and Hale stepped over the debris. The two family leaders bowed their heads, exposing their necks to the twins in a display of unquestionable respect. "The gates are secure," Torin reported, wiping a smear of soot from his cheek. "The archers track their retreat. They cross the river." "They will not return," Hale added, glancing at the blood covering Maddox's chest. "You broke their spirit." "Good," Maddox spat. He wiped his mouth with the back of his hand. He looked at Cole, then rushed to Blair's side. He dropped to his knees, his amber eyes scanning the bleeding gash on her arm. "I told you to stay in the room," Maddox said, his voice thick with a mix of anger and relief. "I don't take orders well," Blair replied, offering a tired smirk. "My wolf thinks you are reckless," Maddox grumbled, glaring at his own chest. "Shut up, I know she saved our flanks. Let me be mad at her." Footsteps echoed from the stone stairs. Elder Rurik emerged from the shadows of the arched corridor. He lacked his thick wooden cane, relying on the stone banister to support his weight. His face was pale, his arrogant posture replaced by a nervous tremble. He surveyed the ruined courtyard, the blood, and the triad sitting victorious among the wreckage. "The threat is neutralized," Rurik announced to the gathered pack, his voice lacking its usual thunder. He reached the bottom step and stopped, refusing to step into the blood-stained yard. "The moon goddess favored our defense, but the trial of leadership remains incomplete." Cole crossed his arms, his unreadable mask slipping into a glare of pure disdain. "You bring politics to a battlefield, old man." Rurik puffed his chest, trying to muster his remaining authority. "The Alpha King is dead. The pack is fractured. The invasion proves we need unified leadership before sunrise. The law demands a single Alpha on the throne and a single Luna by his side." The elder pointed a trembling finger at Blair. "The stray passed the trials," Rurik conceded, the words tasting like poison on his tongue. "She earned her place, but she cannot have both heirs. The brothers must settle the succession. Who takes the crown, and who takes the Omega?" The courtyard fell dead silent. The warriors, the trackers, and the elders all turned their attention to the triad. Maddox set his jaw. He stood up, towering over the crowd, his fists clenching at his sides. Cole remained still, his analytical mind calculating the final moves on the board. Blair leaned against the wooden cart, clutching her bleeding arm. The time for tactical alliances was over. The game reached its end. Chapter 19. The night wind whipped through the broken iron gates, chilling the sweat on Blair's skin. The entire pack held its breath, waiting for the triad to fracture. Rurik stood by the stairs, a desperate gleam in his eye, hoping a fight for the throne would tear the brothers apart. Blair pushed herself off the wooden cart. Her boots crunched against the loose gravel and debris. She walked to the center of the courtyard, standing right between Maddox and Cole. She did not look at the elder. She turned her head and locked eyes with Maddox. "I don't belong to the council," Blair said, her voice carrying over the silent yard. "I don't belong to a political treaty, And I sure don't belong to you, old man. She reached out and grabbed Maddox's hand. His calloused fingers intertwined with hers instantly. The scent of damp cedar and rain washed over her, a comforting anchor in the middle of the carnage. I claim him, Blair announced, squeezing his hand. Maddox let out a breath he didn't know he was holding. His amber eyes burned with fierce, protective warmth. He pulled her closer, tucking her injured left arm safely against his chest. And I claim her. The debate is over. Objection! Rurik shrieked, taking a step away from the banister. Cole carries the royal bloodline. He possesses an equal right to the throne and the Luna. He must challenge you, Maddox. The law demands a duel for the crown. A murmur of anxiety rolled through the crowd. Torin and Hale exchanged nervous glances. A duel between the twins would destroy whatever strength the pack had left. Cole stepped forward. He stood 10 feet away from Maddox and Blair. He looked at their joined hands. He looked at the fierce loyalty burning in the Omega's eyes. The strategist smiled. A genuine, unguarded smile that transformed his unreadable face. You fail to understand the board, Rurik, Cole said, his voice smooth, echoing off the stone walls. You think power only sits on a throne. You think leadership requires a crown. I spent my entire life watching the shadows, analyzing the threats, and planning the moves. I do not want the center stage. I despise the center stage. Cole walked toward Maddox. He stopped 2 feet away. Maddox leads with his chest, Cole continued, projecting his voice to the furthest corners of the courtyard. He inspires the warriors. He breaks the enemy. He is the muscle, the fury, and the heart of this pack. Blair brings the fire. She possesses the tactical unpredictability we need to survive a changing world. Together, they are untouchable. Rurik shook his head, his face turning purple. You abandon your birthright. You surrender. I elevate my position, Cole corrected sharply. Cole dropped to one knee. He bowed his head on the blood-stained cobblestones, exposing his neck to his twin brother. I, Cole, yield the claim, he declared, his words ringing with absolute finality. I pledge my loyalty, my strategy, and my life to Alpha Maddox. I take my place in the shadows. I claim the title of Beta. The impact of the words hit the courtyard like a physical blow. The mastermind stepped down, securing the pack's future without shedding a single drop of brotherly blood. Maddox looked down at his twin. He released Blair's hand, stepped forward, and gripped Cole's shoulder. He hauled his brother back to his feet and pulled him into a fierce, bone-crushing embrace. Thank you, brother, Maddox whispered. Torin dropped to his knees. Hale followed. Within seconds, every warrior, scout, and elder in the courtyard knelt on the stones, exposing their necks to their new alpha. Only Rurik remained standing. He looked around the kneeling pack, his political power evaporating into the night air. He was a king without a chessboard. Defeated, humiliated, and alone, the old man slowly sank to his knees, bowing his head to the stray Omega he tried to destroy. Chapter 20. The clouds broke, allowing bright moonlight to flood the ruined courtyard. Maddox stood tall, the undisputed alpha of the territory. He looked over the kneeling pack, his chest swelling with pride. He reached out and pulled Blair to his side, his arm wrapping tight around her uninjured shoulder. Stand up, Maddox ordered. His voice boomed, carrying the full, undisputed weight of the alpha command. The pack rose to their feet as one. The old laws die tonight, Maddox announced. We build a new foundation. We do not cower behind treaties, and we do not trade our people for peace. From this night forward, Blair is your Luna. Her word is my word. Her enemies are my enemies. Under the light of the moon goddess, the pack is whole. A deafening cheer erupted from the warriors. Torin and Hale pounded their fists against their chests. Cole stood behind the alpha pair, his hands clasped behind his back, a satisfied smirk resting on his face. He caught Rurik slinking away into the shadows and made a mental note to strip the elder of his council seat by morning. Maddox turned to Blair. The wild energy in his eyes softened. "The courtyard smells like dirt and sweat. Let's get you inside." "I thought you would never ask," Blair said, leaning into his side. They left the cheering crowd to Cole and walked back through the winding corridors. The noise faded, replaced by the quiet echo of their boots on the hardwood floors. They reached the guest wing and pushed open the heavy oak door. The room sat exactly as they left it. The stone fireplace remained unlit. The woven rug held the white ceramic basin, the water gone cold, the bloody towel resting on the rim. The empty rectangular wooden box sat on the mantel next to Blair's old, dull knife. Maddox led her to the velvet sofa. The frame creaked as they sat down. He grabbed the clean edge of the towel, dipped it into the cold water, and gently dabbed the dried blood around the jagged gash on her left bicep. He moved with agonizing care, his calloused fingers treating her skin like fragile glass. "Cole will schedule a pack healer for the stitches," Maddox murmured, tossing the ruined towel into the basin. Blair looked at the dark bruising forming on Maddox's ribs. "You took a beating out there." "I heal fast," Maddox said. He leaned back against the cushions and looked at her. The moonlight filtered through the arched window, illuminating the silver strands in her messy hair. "You didn't run. Rurik gave you an out and you stayed." "I told you," Blair said, unbuckling the Damascus steel knife from her belt and setting it on the coffee table. "I don't run from fights, and I protect what belongs to me." Maddox smiled. The expression reached his amber eyes, clear and honest. He reached out, his fingers brushing a stray lock of hair behind her ear. His gaze dropped to her lips. The tension in the room shifted, turning thick and magnetic. Blair's heart hammered against her ribs. She leaned forward, closing the distance between them. Maddox met her halfway, his breath ghosting over her skin. He opened his mouth to speak. "Tell her she smells nice," Maddox shouted, his voice cracking the quiet room like a whip. Blair jumped back, her eyes wide. Maddox slapped his own chest, his face turning bright red. "Shut up! You ruined the moment! You have terrible timing!" Blair stared at the giant, terrifying alpha fighting a shouting match with his own ribs. The sheer absurdity of the situation hit her. She let out a laugh, a real, full-bellied sound that chased the darkness out of the room. Maddox groaned, burying his face in his hands. "I am going to lock him in a mental cage." "Don't you dare," Blair said, still laughing. She grabbed his wrists and pulled his hands away from his face. "I claimed both of you, the fighter and the idiot inside his head." Maddox looked at her, his wild grin returning. He wrapped his arms around her waist, pulling her flush against his chest, and finally captured her lips. The kiss held the promise of fire, loyalty, and a lifetime of beautiful, chaotic noise. The end. Quick favor, don't go anywhere yet. If you thought Blair had guts for pulling a hunting knife on two giant alpha twins, wait until you meet the heroine in this next story on your screen. You need to hear this disaster unfold. Click the video on your screen right now. It is pure, unhinged chaos.